With the NHL season a little less than 6 weeks away, it's time to start thinking about what the 2025-2026 NHL season is going to look like. And on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we're going to talk about what teams can make the leap.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is my good friend and one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. And we want to thank everyone that is making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your teams covered every day. And today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And football season is right around the corner, folks. Visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning those futures bets now. So on today's edition of Locked On NHL, we are going to talk about NHL teams broken down into three categories: retooling/rebuilding, bubble team, or playoff team. Our goal is going to be deciding whether or not the team in question can go to that next step up. Can a rebuilding team get to the bubble of the postseason? Can a bubble team make the playoffs? And can a consistent playoff team, like say the Carolina Hurricanes, for example, get to that contender tier? Of course, being that we are talking in those categories, we are disqualifying the following four teams from today's episode. We will not be discussing the Florida Panthers, Dallas Stars, Colorado Avalanche, or Vegas Golden Knights. All four of those teams are bona fide Stanley Cup contenders. There is no higher tier for them to go to. So to start out today's show, we are going to start at the bottom. We are going to start with teams in that rebuilding, and in the case of three teams, I have written down purgatory status. So first up, the last place team in the entire NHL last year, the San Jose Sharks. I do not think they are going to make a step this upcoming season. Can they get a little bit closer to the bubble? Sure. But to get to 85-ish points, that'd be like a 20-something point leap year over year, and I just don't think that's...
I think the Sharks are going to be more fun to watch this year, especially considering last year, Nick, they were horrible last year, but you turn on some of those late-night Sharks games, they were still a blast to watch. Like, some of these games were really high-scoring. Macklin Celebrini was doing his thing. Eklund was doing his thing. They have a lot of really fun young players there, and I expect them to be better this year, but I don't expect a 20 to 25 point leap. I think they'll be a little bit better this year, but the time for them, it's not there yet, but I think it's coming in the next couple of years, potential. Yeah.
I mean, they had 52 points last year. Yeah. To get to like the bubble would be the low 90s. That'd be a 40-point jump year over year. That's a little bit crazy. Sticking in California, going up to the Anaheim Ducks. Last year, 80 standings points, inching closer. You bring in Chris Kreider, you hire Joel Quenneville. Can you make up 10 points and go from retooling to bubble? I think that's doable. I think the Ducks can stay in the playoff race for most of the season. I don't think they'll actually make the postseason, but I do think they're perfectly capable of hanging around, kind of what we've seen out of Detroit in the East the last couple of years.
I have to see it to believe it. I know the Ducks have playoff expectations going into next season. I like a lot of their young talent as well. I thought the decision to move on from Zegras, it was probably time. It just wasn't really working out there, but I think Cutter Gauthier is going to have another really good year. McTavish is going to be really good. It doesn't look like anything weird is happening with that contract situation. I think there's going to be a bridge deal before he potentially gets a longer term extension. You have Lucas Dostal, who's now the number one goalie there after moving on from John Gibson. I get the reasoning for why they hired Quenneville. I think they can, be in the race for a good bit, but I'm not going to buy into the belief that, we're going to make the playoffs this upcoming season. I don't know who they're going to unseat out of the West to make that spot.
No, they would need to win like at least 6 or 7 more games than they did last year. And that's a big jump, for a group that has a lot of potential, but potential needs to be realized for it to really be worth anything. So next up, another team that's been mired in this grouping for a long time, the Blackhawks, who didn't make any significant additions other than Spencer Knight towards the end of last season. He should help for sure, but this is a Blackhawks team that last year, 61 standings points. That was a 9-point increase year over year. But again, we're talking about a significant 20 to 25 point increase for them to just be a bubble team. And they haven't made any significant additions to help facilitate a better season. Sure, their young guys will probably be a little bit better, all of them individually, and that'll help. But we're talking about significant leaps needing to be made, especially with how tough the West is, just how tough the Central is.
I mean, they need more talent at the end of the day. I felt like we're a little too cautious this year. I understand, they felt like they were maybe a little too aggressive in free agency last year, bringing in too many players, and they want to rely on a lot of their young players that are coming up this year. I get that, but I feel like when you have the cap space that they have, I think you kind of owe it to Bedard to try and at least spend a little bit to try and get this going a little bit, because they're still not even close to making the playoffs, let alone contending for me right now. And this is about to be year 3 of Bedard. I still want him to be a bit more consistent. But again, Nick, he's had not really primates these last couple of years. I mean, he had Ryan Donato on his line for most of last season. And don't get me wrong, Ryan Donato, perfectly fine player. But is he a top line player on a contending team? Probably not. Still, again, had a tremendous year for the Blackhawks. But I think he needs quite a bit of help.
Agreed. Speaking of young players, we all liked what we saw from Matvei Michkov last year. We like some of the moves the Flyers made. The Zegras edition, a worthwhile gamble for a group that's relatively young and maybe ascending, that has massive questions as far as their goaltending situation goes, and I would argue is probably their biggest barrier from going from rebuilding to at least a bubble team. We saw the Flyers 2 years ago, that one season under Tortorella, hang around a long time. They were in the playoff mix until March. Ultimately, the Islanders leapfrogged them. I don't think the Flyers are ready to become a playoff team, but it wouldn't shock me if they hung around for a while, if they were in the low 80s for points this upcoming season, if their young guys all produce relatively well, if Jamie Draisaitl and Trevor Zegras are able to bounce back, or at least in the case of Zegras, bounce back to closer to their peak. I think there's enough meat on the bone there for the Flyers to at least be an interesting hockey team.
The new coach bump could definitely be real. We know that the Canucks, they were struggling to create offense under Rick Tocchet during his tenure at times, but hey, maybe that changes a little bit with the Flyers. Last year under John Tortorella, things just weren't going well, especially to end the season. They decided to make the change. You bring in Rick Tocchet, who it felt like that was their dream candidate once they moved on from Tortorella and really started this search after the season. We'll see if he can give them a bump. Their goaltending, I think, also has to be quite a bit better throughout the whole year if they really want to hang around, in my opinion.
Completely agreed. The other team in the Keystone State, Hunter's Penguins, they are firmly rebuilding. I don't think they are even attempting to be a bubble team.
You look at the moves they've made this offseason. You're bringing in Parker Weatherspoon, Justin Brazeau, Anthony Mantha on these cheap, 1 to 2 year contracts. You're trading for Matt Dumba. Nick, a contending team does not willingly trade for Matt Dumba to try and play on an every night basis. And I mean, no disrespect to Matt Dumba. He was just awful last year for the Dallas Stars, did not even play in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he's only in his early 30s. So that's a little bit scary there. They also took on Connor Clifton at the NHL draft. He also was not very good for the Sabres last year. They'll try to see if they can get him to bounce back to maybe flip him into another team. But this is very much a team right now that is rebuilding on the fly. They're not trying to contend this year. Their prospect pool is a bit better, but it's still missing that bona fide superstar player that can be with the team for years to come. And hey, we'll see if they get it this year, and maybe Gary wants to rig the draft for the Penguins again. I'm just kidding, people, but hey, we'll see if they get Gavin McKenna.
You need to get a picture of Crosby at a Kansas City Chiefs game just to scare the NHL a little bit about looking at houses in that area, because the Penguins need to move. Last team in this opening category, a team the Penguins are very familiar with, the New York Islanders. The Islanders finally embraced that they needed to go in a new direction, bringing in Matthew Darche, drafted 3 players in the first round, had the first overall pick in Matthew Schaefer. I don't think they're close, frankly, to being a playoff team. I think there's room there for them to hang around, especially because the bottom half of both the Atlantic and the Metro are pretty mediocre. But I would be pretty surprised if the Islanders were in the playoff mix come February or March. You look at that defense, the D'Angelo thing was funny for a little while, but He's still not particularly good at defense. I know they're pretty excited about the fact they got rid of Noah Dobson, but Noah Dobson's good. I hate to be that guy. I understand he's frustrating, but that's a really rare archetype when it comes to that skill set. I'm not sure who's
replacing all that production. I like Matthew Schaefer quite a bit. No. He's going to be really good for a long time. He's not going to replace Dobson's production in his rookie season. Like that,
not in year one, no.
He's going to make the team, and I think he's going to be good this year. He'll be in the running to win the Calder, if not the favorite to win the Calder this year. But they're still missing quite a bit of offense from the blue line. I like Sorokin when he's healthy and when he's on, but I think he's been a little too inconsistent.
No Brock Nelson, which we haven't discussed. No Brock Nelson, who they traded to Colorado. You are hoping that Matt Barzal can recapture the magic of a couple years ago. He hasn't played a full season in 2 years now. So the Islanders have a lot of questions. I think they'll be an interesting team because they're trying to do a lot of things at once. And the capacity for that team to maybe be friskier than we think is definitely there. We are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On NHL. And when we come back, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, the mushy middle of the NHL. August 26th is officially FanDuel's Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you think you know who's going to win the Super Bowl before we kick the season off, it's your time to shine. I am of the opinion that futures bets are fun when you throw darts at the board. So for MVP, CJ Stroud, somewhere between 15 to 20 to 1. If the Texans can bounce back, have a nice season, the narrative is there. A real dark horse, you get somewhere in the mid-20s to low 30s to 1. Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars coming back with a new head coach, Liam Cohen, someone who's going to get the best out of them. You have Travis Hunter, you have Brian Thomas. That is a really explosive offense on paper. The right coach might be able to synthesize it all together. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where we have so much more to get to. So without further ado, I have four teams in the category I have called Purgatory. They are the Seattle Kraken, the Nashville Predators, and the Boston Bruins. These are teams who all have real issues, really bad contracts, aging core, and in the case of the Bruins, they have good contracts in Pasternak and McAvoy, but just the path to winning hockey games is just really dark. You know, there was a joke that after all the signings the Bruins had made the first day of free agency, that Don Sweeney solved the Bruins' problem of not having a second line by having 3 third lines. And I think that's a really apropos way of describing the situation there. We've been very critical of the situation in Seattle, who has failed to take any discernible steps towards contendership. And then Nashville, Barry Trotz would have a great team if it was 2018. You know, if it was 2018, that Predators team would be Stanley Cup favorites. But now, 2025, there's just not a lot to look forward to for any of those groups. Barry
Trotz is now on the list of every good GM needs to have him on speed dial to try and call to fleece him. I've seen Kyle Dubas fleece him multiple times ever since he got the Predators GM job. And I just don't know what Barry's plan is in Nashville. I really don't understand it. When you look at Boston, I just want to know, Nick, who's scoring the goals outside of Pasta this year? Seriously, who is going to score the goals for this team consistently outside of David Pastrnak? You will now not have Brad Marchand for an entire full season. He's finishing his career with the Florida Panthers. That was someone you could rely on for quite a bit of goals, a good amount of points. You could play him in literally any situation. You won't have that production. How are you going to be able to replace that production? I don't think they're going to be able to. You need a better year from Jeremy Swayman, TBD on that. Charlie McAvoy, you know what you're going to get from him when he's healthy. But I still look up and down this Bruins team. Where are the difference makers outside of Pastrnak at forward and McAvoy on defense? I don't think this team is going to be that good this year. I'd be kind of surprised. Seattle, it feels like they're just trying to build a team full of middle 6 to third line forwards. Like that's what it feels like Seattle's front office plan is. And I've never understood it these last couple of years, like the moves that they have made to not really go out and try and get legitimate top line to top 6 forwards. They just want to collect as many, again, middle 6, third line infinity stones as they can. Their defense is also kind of as well. Their goaltending situation is
It's okay.
He's not
I like
bad.
the core.
When
He got
healthy,
an
he's
invite to
good.
the
He just needs some more help in front of him. But again,
yeah.
they have a weird dynamic going on there. Their front office, I think, is odd. The whole coaching situation has been very strange these last couple of years with the decisions they've made and how it feels like the front office was really split on that first one before moving on after 1 year. I just don't know what direction that they want to go in. And then again, Boston, Nashville, I still don't see them being that good this year either.
No. And next up, we're going to put two teams in the bubble category who had very similar trajectories. Really good 2 years ago. Last year, massively underperformed expectations. I have, of course, talking about the New York Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. I think both of these teams can go from what they were last year, which were bubble teams, to playoff teams. I think it is perfectly reasonable to expect the Rangers to make the playoffs. I don't think they will do a whole lot once they get there. And I think the Canucks have the capacity, should Thatcher Demko be healthy, which is a massive asterisk at this point. And if Elias Pettersson can bounce back, I think both of these teams have a real chance to make the playoffs, but anything more than that.
Right. Right now, the Rangers, if I had to pick where they're going to finish right now in the Metro, I would probably put them fourth behind Carolina, New Jersey, Washington. I think Washington is still a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to win the Metro, especially after beating shooting percentage merchants throughout most of last season. I still think they're going to be good, but I don't think they're going to be as good as last year. The Rangers, I have them fourth, Nick, kind of a wild card team, a team that can get in, but how much more are you going to get out of Mika Zibanejad? Are you going to get a lot more also out of Artemi Panarin? How is Fox going to play with Gavrikov now? I think in my opinion, I think he's going to play really well. But outside of that, and him and Gavrikov on the defense, who else is going to step up on the back end? Is Igor Shesterkin going to, keep doing his thing? I probably lean yes, just because he's one of the best goaltenders on the planet, but he still needs a little bit more help in front of him outside of just two actually good defensemen. I think there's just a lot of questions for the Rangers, especially up front. I saw the rumor that Zibanejad might be playing on the wing this year, Nick, which I think makes their center depth a bit worse, in my opinion. So we'll have to see what Mike Sullivan decides to do with that. With the Canucks, we all know how good Quinn Hughes is going to be. He's arguably the best defenseman on the planet. I'd put him right behind Cale Makar, in my opinion. If Demko can stay healthy, that is massive considering how underrated he is as a goalie. And also, can they get the new coach bump? There was a lot of turmoil with, Rick Tocchet last season and, the whole Pettersson, JT Miller situation and all that. Now that that's fixed, now that you have a new coach with less noise, can this team bounce back? There's a chance, especially if Pettersson is better. Some of their other players, they brought Besser back, which I didn't think was possible. I thought he was for sure going to walk. How does he perform? So there's a path to them maybe being a wild card team, but I don't think this team is a bona fide contender.
No, I don't think they're close as far as winning the whole thing. Now, this next grouping is pretty big, but all of these teams fit a very similar box. We have the Blue Jackets, the Red Wings, the Sabres, the Blues, the Utah Mammoth, I almost said hockey club, I forgot, and the Calgary Flames, who all have relatively nice young pieces. They all have guys that we feel interested in. Some of these teams, I could make an argument maybe Buffalo should have been in the purgatory category, but there's a lot here to chew on. And a lot of these teams, I think, are going to be contingent upon what their young guys do. I think Columbus, if they get reasonable goaltending, I think Columbus can make the playoffs. Detroit and Buffalo, I think, are in very similar boats where uncertainty in net is going to raise a lot of questions. Their depth is of real concern. And then in the case of St. Louis and Utah, can St. Louis play as good of defense as they did last year down the stretch where they were the best team in hockey post Four Nations face-off for a full season? That seems like a bit of a stretch based on the personnel they have, even though I do like what they were able to do down the stretch. Robert Thomas took a real leap in his development and really showed he's a bona fide top 10 center in the league or so. And then Utah, Calgary, I like the young pieces. I just want to see a little bit more. And if any of the auxiliary, younger pieces that are going to make their NHL debut this upcoming season can make a real leap, can Dustin Wolf get some help? Can Nazem Kadri stave off the aging curve? Or are they going to sell Rasmus Andersson ahead of his contract expiring? So there's a lot to chew on here, but this is a pretty interesting group as far as conversation goes, because I can see an argument for all of these teams making the playoffs. I'll
start with Columbus. That was the best feel-good story of last season. They almost got into the Stanley Cup playoffs despite going through everything that they did before the season started. I like a lot of their young pieces going into this season. Once again, I think Zach Werenski is one of the best defensemen in the league. I felt like they had a real opportunity to make a lot of noise this offseason, and they really didn't. I didn't really like the offseason that they've had so far. Again, I just really felt like they had an opportunity to really improve the team, and I don't think they did. So I think standings-wise, they're going into the season similarly, but they have an opportunity to potentially get in if everything breaks right for them and their young pieces continue to develop. Werenski has another big year. They get decent goaltending. Dean Evison continues his, solid tenure there, all that good stuff. Calgary, Dustin Wolf, I want to see more. I thought he was tremendous last season, the biggest reason why the Flames were in that race. I also thought Nick Nazem Kadri was also really good for the Flames last season. I like some of their young pieces. I still think they're a couple of really good pieces away, but again, kind of like Columbus, if everything breaks right for them again, they'll be in the race. I'm just not sure that they're going to be able to get in. Utah, in my opinion, I think has a better shot compared to those teams that I just mentioned. I love the JJ Peterka trade for them, teaming up with Clayton Keller and a couple of their other really good young pieces there. I really like that team heading into this season. Of those three that I've already talked about, I think Utah has the best chance of getting in. But again, the West is just really deep. So who are they unseating to get in? St. Louis, you said it, Robert Thomas was really good last season. I thought Jordan Kyrou was also great for the Blues last season. I think they can still play really stingy defense. Jim Montgomery, one of the best, defensive coaches in the league. I think he's going to get a lot out of that group next season. I would expect them to very much be in the playoff race. I mean, this team was literally seconds away from getting to the second round against the Winnipeg Jets, had a 2-goal lead with less than 2 minutes left before they blew it. I do like that team going into next year, but I think at best they're a first or second round team. Buffalo, Nick, again, like Anaheim, I got to see it to believe it. I mean, this team has been losing for so long now where, again, man, I really don't see them making the playoffs this upcoming season unless they really surprise me. I like a lot of their young pieces, but it's time for them to really put it together here, my friend. We can't just keep saying like, oh, this is going to be the year to make the playoffs. Oh, no, this is going to be the year to make the playoffs. How about you actually go out there and defy expectations and go do it and give your fans something to cheer about instead of whatever the hell this has been for the last decade plus? I feel awful for the fine faithful of Buffalo. They show up every game and they get rewarded with that slop that they see at home on a nightly basis where the team is just getting blown out. So we'll have to see on that. Did I forget any of those teams? Because I know there was a lot.
No, you got them all. Okay. You got them all. You're doing well. We have one final segment on today's edition of Locked On NHL, where we're going to talk about a lot of the teams that have made the playoffs for the last 5 to 10 years, but haven't done a whole lot once they've gotten there. Coming up next. Have you ever made the impulse decision last minute? You got to be at the game tonight. Maybe it's game day, and suddenly you just got that itch, and that's exactly where our friends at Game Time come in to help. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite more people to get to the game with you. Game Time makes it happen. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they have incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB that makes it easy to browse the app for exciting games. I am trying to get to at least 1 to 2 more Met games before the regular season is over. And my favorite part of the Game Time ticket buying experience is the panoramic seat view, where they show you the view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're sitting. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL as we are making our way through all 28 of the teams we're going to talk about on today's show. So next up, I have a group that has been in the playoffs pretty consistently for a while. Headlines by teams like the LA Kings, the Winnipeg Jets, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Carolina Hurricanes. Are teams in this group pretty much the better version of the group we talked about last segment? The guys who, if every possible thing breaks right for them, sure, they could go all the way. But does anyone really think the Leafs are going to win the Cup? Does anyone think Carolina, Washington, the Kings, Tampa Bay, these teams are all going to make the playoffs, sure. But when you look at the heavyweights in the respective conferences, you really think the Kings are getting past the Avalanche? They can't even get past the Oilers.
I mean, this was their best year to do it. I mean, they had the Oilers that felt like dead to rights throughout a lot of that series, and they just couldn't beat them. Like, the Oilers are their boogeyman at this rate. Like, that was how the series went. And I saw a rumor that this could be Kopitar's last season. I'm not really sure how much I buy that. Would suck just because I've really enjoyed watching Kopitar throughout my life. But that's a bona fide playoff team. But anything more than that right now, unless things break right for them, they get the right draw, I think that's wishful thinking. The Maple Leafs, I think they can make the playoffs. I think even without Mitch Marner, that's still a lot of production to replace. You're talking about a 100-plus point player, someone who's also really good defensively, but they're still not as dangerous without him in the lineup. You know, I've seen some of these weird tweets. I saw Mike Stevens had a tweet the other day talking about like, oh, I'm just really excited to, you know, watch the Maple Leafs without Mitch Marner and all that stuff. And it's like, man, 100-point player, man. Like, he's also really good defensively. Like, he's going to do a lot of really good stuff with the Vegas Golden Knights. I think of those teams that you mentioned, I think Tampa Bay has the best shot of getting to that next tier. I know, you know, they did their thing. They won multiple Stanley Cups. Nikita Kucherov was absolutely unbelievable, but they still have a really good core. I still want them to be a little bit deeper. But, you know, saying some of those top players, they get a bit hot. Andrei Vasilevsky does his usual thing. They can go somewhere in the East. It just sucks, Nick, because they played the Panthers in the first round. And yeah, I know people. I took the Lightning to win that series. I'd look like a complete idiot after. But I think the Lightning, if they had maybe a bit of a better draw, could have done a little bit more damage. I still don't know if they would have gotten past Florida. I was a complete idiot with that series. But I think of those teams we just mentioned, they have the best shot. Carolina, I like the moves they've made, but give me another true difference maker, and then we can talk, just because it feels like every time they play a team that is A, deeper, and B, has more pure star talent, they struggle. So they need a true bona fide superstar if they are going to break through. And you've seen their management talk about that. You've seen their head coach talk about that. They need to court a really good star to that team, in my opinion. So, you know, talk about the Kings, talk about the Maple Leafs, talked about the Hurricanes. I think I was able to get most of those teams there. Washington, I think they're a regular playoff team, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to really go that deep. I think their ceiling is what they did last year. New Jersey, that one is interesting. Nick, if they all stay healthy and they get damn good goaltending and Dougie Hamilton does his thing, if he doesn't get traded, I know there have been rumors, that can be a bona fide Stanley Cup team. But still, a few things have to go right. I think they're in your next category, though.
So, speaking of teams who they need things to go right, I have the Oilers in this tier. I think the Oilers missed their shot. Just being candid, I think the last 2 years is probably the best you're going to get. You think about all of the talent they have lost over the last 2 years as Stanley Cup finalists, you understand that if you are consistently good for a while, eventually you're going to start to lose your depth. In a 2-year window, you lose Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg, you lose Connor Brown, you lose Corey Perry. You start to lose that level of, and look, none of those guys on an individual basis is anything incredible, but they have so many question marks in this lineup. What are you getting from Mike Howard? What are you getting from Matthew Savoie? Is Mangiapane going to bounce back, or is he effectively a super third liner who you're going to staple to one of your stars and hope you can drag his production to a higher level? Can Podkolzin give you more? Can Zach Hyman stay healthy? He dealt with injury issues last year. Because as long as you have McDavid, Draisaitl, you should make the playoffs. But I really struggle to see them going to a final a third straight year, especially with where they're at. You know, their defense is better on paper than it was at the start of last year. I love Jake Wallman. He was a great addition for them, but it's a scoring league. I don't care how good the defense is at a certain point. Eventually, you're going to need to score more.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that, but Nick, they still need to go get a goalie, I think, in my opinion. I think they really do need a true upgrade there. And if you want Tristan Jarry, the Penguins can sell you to him for pennies on the dollar. I'm just messing around with you. You know, I like the Oilers a lot, but it's asking a lot for them to go back to a third straight final with how deep the West is. Yeah, I know. They've mowed through the West these last couple of years. There is no denying that. They have been But
it's hard to do though, and that's the thing people lose sight of.
This will be a third straight year. Colorado is going to be insanely good once again. Vegas is going to be better. I even said it on the show multiple times. They're not going to take that loss to the Oilers lightly, and they did not. Look at the moves they have made. If that team is fully healthy, I think I might take them to come out of the West next season. You have the Dallas Stars, of course. They are going to be very good once again. You have, obviously,
teams like Minnesota and Winnipeg.
We didn't really talk about Minnesota so far, Nick. I kind of have them as a playoff team that if a little more things go right, they can maybe get to that next tier. But I still think they need a little bit more in that lineup, in my opinion. Winnipeg, I like them quite a bit as well. But do they have the necessary depth to go up against some of these other top tier teams? Not sure about that right now. So we'll see about that. The Oilers, though, I get scared thinking about, can they get back to a third straight year when you go up against fresher teams like the Golden Knights and like the Avalanche?
I mean, in NHL history, it hasn't happened since the original 6 era, a team going to 3 straight finals and winning for the first time in the third attempt. It just doesn't happen in the contemporary NHL. They have a lot of questions. I would say the Jets probably missed their shot with the group they have. Last year was a really good opportunity for them. If they could have gotten to the conference final, maybe they could have been able to beat Edmonton as a little bit more of a defense first team. But when you think about it, and the last 3 teams we have here, Montreal, Ottawa, and the Devils. I think Montreal and Ottawa are both interesting. I think Montreal has the real potential to make a serious leap this year into contender status where they could push for probably second or even first in the Atlantic Division. I think the Devils, if they're healthy, can win the Metro, absolutely. And Ottawa, I want to believe Ottawa, if they get the right draw, can get to the second round, maybe even a conference final if their young guys continue to take leaps. Maybe Brady Tkachuk plays a smidge better. There's a lot to like in that group, and I'd put Minnesota in that group as well, where they're finally starting to make headway in the trajectory of their roster, the direction they want to go in, orienting the team around the younger pieces. Can Gustafsson stay healthy? Can he put together a nice goaltending season? Can Kaprizov stay healthy and be a Hart Trophy guy again like he was for the first 4 months of the season last year? There's a lot to like with all 4 of those
I think with
teams.
Montreal, they were more of a bubble team last year. I think they can get into that next year, Nick, of being a bona fide playoff team for this year and for years to come. Yeah. I like that forward group quite a bit. Love the Dobson trade. If Montembeault gives them a little bit above average goaltending, I think they will comfortably make the playoffs. I know I've seen people say that they're going to take a bit of a step back, but I think that team can contend for a top 3 spot in the Atlantic this year. Not sure how far they're going to go in the playoffs, but they're building something really good up there. Ottawa, I think they can also – last year I kind of had them in that bubble stage as well, but I was also kind of saying, like, if you don't do it this year, a.k.a. make the playoffs, I'm not sure when you ever are going to, and you probably have to make changes. Luckily, they did. They can keep their core for as long as they want. We'll see, as you said, can they get the right matchup, Nick? Are they going to play a team like the Panthers in the first round? Are they going to play a team like the Lightning in the first round? I would take both those teams to beat the Senators in the first round. Now, if we got a rematch against the Maple Leafs, I might be inclined to take the Senators, especially without no Mitch Marner for the Maple Leafs during that series. So we'll have to see on that one. We already discussed, Minnesota, at least on my end. Kirill Kaprizov is about to get paid, and I mean paid, my friend. It looks like they are going to come to an extension with Marco Rossi after all the trade rumors. I like Gustafsson in net. Defensively, I think they're fine enough. I just want them to maybe upgrade a couple of their forward spots at some point during the season. But it looks like after those really bad cap recaptures, they're out of that. They have the salary cap space. It's up to Billy Guerin to utilize it to try and push this team really up to that contender status. New Jersey, as I said, they stay healthy. I think the sky might be the limit for them. Really, I think they can win the Metro if Jack Hughes is fully healthy and he can have a potential 100-point season, and they can maybe make a run to the conference finals. But that's been the biggest thing, Nick. He hasn't been able to stay healthy at times. Nico Hischier, can he stay fully healthy as well? He's had a couple injury problems.
Dougie as well. I mean, last year at points, they had like 4 or 5 of their six defensemen from opening night hurt at the same time. So that's a real concern for them, even though, we're all in agreement. Heischer, Hughes, and Bratt on the contracts they're on are great value. And, last year, Palat, so you'll have a little more flexibility going forward. Last year, Dougie Hamilton, you'll have a little more flexibility going forward. Maybe we have this conversation next summer and we're talking about what does Quinn Hughes do for the Devils going forward. So there's a whole lot of time left till the season gets going. But for now, this is an opening conversation about where we think all 32 teams are. We'd like to thank everyone that made Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your teams covered every day. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Hunter and I will see you guys next Thursday.